Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm your host today, Carrie Coogan, and we're so pleased to be at Kansas City's historic Union Station. We're inside the Science City Museum, and we're joined today by Secretary of State Kris Kobach. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
I know it was highly publicized, but how did the election go?
Well, the 2014 November election in Kansas went really well. We set a couple of records. We had a record number of voters registered going into a non-presidential election and a record number of people voting in a non-presidential election. Almost 900,000 voters participated in the election. And one of the really interesting things was our voter turnout went up over 2010, the last non-presidential election, in spite of the fact that we added all of our election security measures. So we had, of course, we became the first state in 2011 to combine photo ID with proof of citizenship and equivalent security for mail-in ballots. And some people thought that that would depress voter turnout, but on the contrary, voter turnout went up. And I think it puts to rest the argument that photo ID somehow discourages people from going to the polls. Because as we all know, everybody has a driver's license with them.
So, I mean, you know, it's no secret that voter fraud, all those things have been sort of controversial topics that you brought to the forefront. I'm just curious, why is this such a big issue for you? I mean, it's not just here, it's nationwide. Why do you care about it? I mean,
well, because if you think about the foundation of our republic, there are two things at the foundation. One is our Constitution, and the other is fair elections. If we don't believe that our elections are fair, then our whole system begins to crumble. And we have so many close elections. We had the famous Rizzo versus Royster election where the primary was decided on the Democrat side by one vote, and there were many allegations of fraud there. Just in the last cycle in Kansas, in the general election, we had 3 different state rep races where the margin of victory was below 50 votes. When you have those close races, you have to be certain that every single vote is a legitimate vote that is cast. And so that's why I care so much about it. It's really fundamental to our democratic system that we have fair elections, and there is a significant amount of fraud that was going on in Kansas that continues to go on in Missouri, and that's why we made these changes.
But to the people that, as you know, say that all of these changes scare people away, they don't come, that it does affect voting.
And we now have empirical evidence in Kansas that we made these changes. From 2010 to 2014, voter turnout went up after we made these changes, not down. And I think that's really important to note because the argument was always a flimsy one. Why in the world would it dissuade you from voting if you carry your driver's license around with you everywhere, and usually most people drive to the polls and would have their driver's license with them? Why in the world would they decide not to vote because they have to produce a driver's license? In the 21st century, we always carry photo ID around. And I didn't think the argument made much sense, but now we have empirical evidence to show that the argument was wrong.
So now that the election is over, what kinds of legislation are you going to be working on? What are you focusing your time on?
We have 2 big legislative bills, projects that we're going to be trying to move through the Kansas legislature this year. One is prosecutorial authority for the Secretary of State and for the Attorney General to prosecute election crimes. Right now, they're only prosecuted by the county attorneys. This is important because there are still some forms of voter fraud that photo ID and proof of citizenship don't address.
Yeah, so for somebody sitting at home, what does that mean? I mean, like, what exactly are you trying to do?
Okay, so for example, one type of voter fraud that still occurs even after the reforms we've made in Kansas is double voting. You'd be amazed how many times people are still registered in one state. Maybe someone moves from Missouri into Kansas, but they're still registered in Missouri, and it happens all the time. People will try to vote in both states, vote by mail in one state and vote in person in the other. And it rarely gets prosecuted. And what we would like to do is give authority to the Attorney General and the Secretary of State's office to go after that crime and deter it by, once people start hearing that you're going to have to pay a $1,000 fine or a $2,000 fine, then they might reconsider whether they really want to vote twice in both states.
Anything other big issues that you're focusing on that don't relate to voting?
Well, obviously, part of my career has been fighting illegal immigration, and so I'm working with Kansas legislators and legislators in other states on legislation to discourage illegal immigration in those states.
Well, thank you so much for coming here today. I appreciate your time. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
That's all the time we have for Newsmakers today, but we'll see you back here again next time.